Australia's story begins over 65,000 years ago with the arrival of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, who embarked on a remarkable journey across ancient land bridges and short sea routes from Southeast Asia to inhabit a continent of vast ecological diversity. These early Australians settled in a land marked by arid deserts, dense rainforests, and sprawling grasslands, and over millennia, they developed intricate societies with over 250 languages and rich cultural traditions. Their spiritual and practical connection to the land is vividly captured in Dreamtime stories, which narrate the creation of the world and the deeds of ancestral beings, weaving a deep cultural and moral framework into their daily lives. Their innovative environmental practices, such as fire stick farming, involved controlled burns that managed vegetation growth, facilitated the spread of edible plants, and reduced the risk of larger wildfires, thus shaping the landscape in harmony with their needs. This sustainable land management not only ensured their survival but also maintained the ecological balance of their environment. The ancient rock art found in Kakadu National Park and other significant sites offers a profound glimpse into their cultural heritage, depicting a rich array of animals, human figures, and symbolic patterns that narrate their ancestral stories and rituals. These artworks are not merely decorative but serve as vital historical records and educational tools, preserving the knowledge and traditions of generations. Through their deep spiritual connection and sophisticated environmental strategies, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples established a resilient and adaptive way of life that profoundly shaped their world and continues to resonate in their cultural legacy today. The European exploration of Australia began in earnest in the early 17th century, marked by Dutch navigator Willem Janszoon's voyage in 1606. Janszoon, aboard the Dijfken, made landfall on the western coast of Cape York Peninsula, becoming the first known European to set foot on the Australian continent. His detailed reports described the region as inhospitable and sparsely populated, with dense mangroves and unyielding terrain. Janszoon's encounters with the Indigenous peoples, who resisted his presence, further cemented the notion of Australia as a land fraught with challenges. Despite this, Janszoon's journey was pivotal, providing Europeans with the first cartographic record of the continent. Following Janszoon, Dutch explorer Abel Tasman undertook his voyage in 1642, which would prove to be more consequential in mapping Australia. Tasman's expedition, commissioned by the Dutch East India Company, aimed to explore the southern lands. Tasman's journey around the coast of Tasmania, which he initially named Van Diemen's Land, and his mapping of the southern coast of Australia, revealed a rugged, largely uninviting landscape. Despite Tasman's detailed observations, including the discovery of the Great Landmass, now known as Tasmania and parts of the southern Australian coast, his findings did not incite immediate European interest in colonization. His reports highlighted the continent's geographic and climatic challenges, leading to a period of diminished European interest. It wasn't until the late 18th century that Britain, facing overcrowded prisons and seeking new territories for expansion, shifted its focus to Australia. The idea of using the continent as a penal colony, combined with strategic and economic motivations, gained momentum. This newfound interest set the stage for significant changes as Britain prepared to establish a permanent European presence in Australia, fundamentally altering the continent's landscape and its indigenous cultures. The crucial moment for Australia's history came in 1770, when Captain James Cook, aboard the HMS Endeavour, completed a comprehensive survey of the eastern coastline, ranging from the northern reaches of Queensland to the southern shores of what would become New South Wales. Cook's meticulous charts and reports, describing the land as rich with fertile soil, abundant resources, and ideal for cultivation, ignited Britain's ambition to claim and settle this vast and promising new territory. His detailed observations painted a picture of a land ripe for economic exploitation and strategic importance. Consequently, in 1788, Britain dispatched the First Fleet, a convoy of 11 ships under Captain Arthur Phillip, to establish a new penal colony. Initially landing at Botany Bay, the fleet encountered unsuitable conditions and swiftly relocated to the more favorable Port Jackson, where the Sydney Cove area offered a better harbor and more promising prospects for settlement. However, the establishment of New South Wales as a penal colony was fraught with adversity. The settlers, primarily convicts, faced dire shortages of food and supplies, exacerbated by the colony's remote location and the harsh, unfamiliar environment. They grappled with the challenge of cultivating crops in soil that was often less fertile than anticipated and faced frequent shortages of fresh water and other essentials. The early years of the colony were marked by extreme hardship, with convicts and settlers struggling to build a viable community amidst the vast and rugged Australian landscape. This struggle for survival was further complicated by the violent interactions with the Aboriginal peoples, whose rich and ancient cultures were profoundly disrupted by the arrival of the British. The settlers' lack of understanding and often outright hostility towards the Aboriginal inhabitants led to frequent conflicts, displacement, and devastating loss of life due to introduced diseases to which the indigenous populations had no immunity. The clash between European settlers and the Aboriginal peoples was not merely a series of skirmishes, but a profound and tragic upheaval that reshaped both the land and its original inhabitants. Thus, the early years of British colonization in Australia were defined by a grueling fight for survival, a complex and often violent interaction with the land's original inhabitants, and the formidable challenge of establishing a foothold in a new and unpredictable environment, laying the groundwork for the multifaceted and often contentious history that followed. The early years of Australia's colonization were marked by a relentless struggle for survival and adaptation against formidable odds. The arrival of the First Fleet in 1788 brought with it not only the promise of new beginnings but also immediate hardships. The settlers, largely comprised of convicts and their guards, faced a harsh new environment characterized by unpredictable weather, poor soil conditions, and insufficient supplies. Their attempts to cultivate the land met with repeated failures due to the dry, rocky soil and erratic rainfall, leading to dire food shortages that pushed the colony to the brink of starvation. The initial excitement of claiming fertile lands quickly dissipated as the harsh reality of life in the new colony set in, with settlers often struggling to find adequate resources and sustain their basic needs. The situation was further exacerbated by the expansion of the colony beyond New South Wales. In 1803, Van Diemen's Land, now Tasmania, was established, but it too faced a multitude of challenges. The colony's remote location made resupply missions sporadic and unreliable, leading to persistent food shortages and extreme isolation. The settlers' attempts to forge a stable existence were continually thwarted by these logistical issues, and the harsh environment proved a significant barrier to their success. Additionally, conflicts with Indigenous Tasmanians intensified as European settlers encroached upon traditional lands, resulting in violent clashes and further disruption of Indigenous ways of life. The imposition of European land management practices significantly altered the local ecosystem, compounding the hardships faced by both settlers and Aboriginal communities. Similarly, the establishment of the Swan River Colony, Western Australia, in 1829 brought its own set of difficulties. The settlers in this remote western outpost grappled with a scarcity of resources, including limited access to fresh water and fertile land. The colony's isolation from other settlements in the eastern states created significant challenges in terms of communication and support. The harsh conditions and sparse resources made it difficult to build a stable and thriving community. The expansion into the Swan River region also led to conflicts with local Aboriginal groups, whose lands were increasingly encroached upon. The settlers' attempts to impose European agricultural and land management practices disrupted traditional Aboriginal lifestyles and intensified the already strained relations. These early struggles were emblematic of the broader challenges faced by Australian colonies as they sought to establish themselves in a land that was as challenging as it was promising. The discovery of gold in New South Wales in 1851 ignited a transformative wave in Australia's history that reverberated across the continent. This seismic event drew a global flood of prospectors seeking fortune, which rapidly accelerated the population growth of Australian colonies and propelled them into a new era of economic vitality. The bustling cities of Melbourne and Sydney, once modest settlements, rapidly burgeoned into dynamic hubs of commerce, finance, and industry, fueled by the influx of wealth and the establishment of goldfields. The gold rush spurred monumental advancements in infrastructure, including the construction of railways, ports, and public facilities, which laid the groundwork for Australia's modern economic landscape. However, this period of prosperity also brought profound social and cultural upheaval. The scramble for gold and the subsequent land rush led to escalating tensions and conflicts with Indigenous Australians, whose traditional lands and ways of life were severely disrupted. These conflicts were exacerbated by the imposition of European land management practices, which often disregarded Indigenous knowledge and sovereignty. The tensions among the settlers themselves also came to a head, most notably in the Eureka Stockade Rebellion of 1854. This significant uprising was fueled by miners' frustration with high licensing fees, restrictive regulations, and inadequate working conditions. The rebellion, characterized by its dramatic confrontation at Ballarat, became a symbol of the broader struggle for political reform and fair governance. The aftermath of the rebellion saw a shift towards more democratic practices and reforms, reflecting a growing desire among the population for greater representation and equity. Thus, while the gold rush era was marked by economic boom and urban expansion, it also highlighted deep-seated issues and conflicts that would shape Australia's development and identity in the years to come. As the 19th century drew to a close, Australia's 6 British colonies found themselves increasingly entangled in the complexities of separate governance systems, each with its own laws, tariffs, and trade regulations. This fragmentation highlighted inefficiencies and created barriers to economic and political cohesion. The idea of federation began to gain traction as leaders and citizens alike recognized the benefits of a unified national identity and streamlined administration. The push for federation was marked by spirited debates and negotiations over key issues such as state sovereignty, the distribution of powers, and the formation of a federal budget. In 1901, this momentum culminated in the passage of the Australian Constitution, which formally created the Commonwealth of Australia and established a federal system of government. The Constitution delineated powers between the federal government and the states, aiming to balance central authority with regional autonomy. The transition to a federated nation involved considerable logistical and administrative challenges, including the establishment of new institutions such as the Federal Parliament and the High Court, and the adaptation of legal and economic systems to the new federal framework. Despite the optimism surrounding federation, the process also revealed deep-seated regional rivalries and disagreements over representation and economic policy, necessitating careful negotiation and compromise. The unification brought about significant changes, including the creation of a national identity distinct from British colonial roots, and set the foundation for a more cohesive national governance structure that would guide Australia's development into the 20th century. Australia's engagement in World War I from 1914 to 1918 profoundly impacted its national consciousness, particularly through the involvement of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, ASOC, in the Gallipoli Campaign. This ill-fated campaign, launched in April 1915, aimed to secure the Dardanelles and open a sea route to Russia, but instead became a grueling test of endurance and courage. The appalling conditions, including harsh weather, inadequate supplies, and fierce enemy resistance, led to heavy casualties among the Anzac troops, with thousands killed or wounded. The harsh realities of Gallipoli became emblematic of Australia's military sacrifice and forged a strong sense of national identity and pride. The commemorations of Anzac Day, observed annually on April 25th, became a significant part of Australian culture, reflecting on the legacy of those who served and fostering a collective memory of bravery and resilience. In the interwar years, Australia grappled with severe economic challenges, most notably during the Great Depression of the 1930s. The economic downturn led to widespread unemployment, with nearly 1/3 of the workforce jobless, and a stark increase in poverty and social discontent. In response, the Australian government, under Prime Minister James Scullin and later Joseph Lyons, introduced several interventionist policies. These included welfare programs to support the unemployed and various public works, projects aimed at stimulating economic activity and creating jobs, such as the construction of roads and public buildings. World War II, from 1939 to 1945, ushered in a period of significant strategic and social change for Australia. The threat of Japanese invasion, particularly following the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, and the subsequent advances across the Pacific, prompted Australia to reassess its defense strategies. This led to a shift in foreign policy, as Australia deepened its strategic alliance with the United States, marking a departure from its previous reliance on Britain. The presence of American troops and the establishment of military bases in Australia were pivotal in the Pacific War efforts and helped strengthen the US-Australia alliance, which would have lasting implications for future defense policies. The wartime period also brought about profound social changes within Australia. The need for a large and diverse workforce during the war led to a significant increase in women's participation in the workforce, with women taking on roles traditionally occupied by men, including positions in manufacturing, agriculture, and public services. This shift not only contributed to the war effort, but also catalyzed changes in societal norms regarding gender roles. Women's contributions were recognized and valued in new ways, paving the way for post-war social reforms and advancements in gender equality. The social and economic transformations during this period laid the groundwork for Australia's modern identity, influencing both its domestic policies and international relations in the decades that followed. The post-war era in Australia was a period of profound transformation and revitalization, driven by a concerted effort to rebuild and modernize a nation deeply affected by the ravages of World War II, with the Australian economy in need of robust growth and labor shortages to address. The government launched an ambitious immigration program designed to attract skilled workers and boost economic development. This initiative brought waves of immigrants from Europe who were seeking refuge from the aftermath of war, as well as from the Middle East and Asia, leading to a dynamic shift in Australia's demographic landscape. The arrival of these new settlers not only addressed the immediate labor needs, but also introduced a wealth of cultural diversity that enriched Australian society. This influx led to vibrant new communities, which contributed significantly to the country's economic and social fabric, bringing with them a variety of traditions, languages, and cultural practices that began to shape Australia's multicultural identity. The economic boom of the 1950s and 1960s was a critical period in which Australia undertook substantial infrastructure development, including the construction of major highways that facilitated improved connectivity between urban and rural areas and the establishment of new schools and hospitals to meet the needs of a growing population. This infrastructure not only supported economic expansion but also signaled a commitment to enhancing living standards and accessibility for all Australians. The development of these public facilities played a key role in fostering a more equitable and prosperous society, laying the groundwork for future advancements in health, education, and transportation. Socially, this period was marked by significant reforms that reshaped the nation's approach to multiculturalism and civil rights. The gradual dismantling of the White Australia policy, which had long restricted non-European immigration, was a landmark change that reflected a broader shift towards inclusivity and diversity. This policy change was accompanied by an evolving cultural narrative that embraced a more inclusive view of Australian identity, recognizing the contributions of diverse ethnic and cultural groups. These changes were also mirrored by advancements in civil rights, addressing inequalities and promoting social justice. The era witnessed the introduction of policies that aimed to redress historical injustices and improve the rights and opportunities available to marginalized groups. This transformative period not only propelled Australia into a new era of economic prosperity, but also laid the foundation for a more inclusive and dynamic society, setting the stage for its continued evolution and growth into the 21st century. The latter half of the 20th century marked a transformative era for Indigenous rights in Australia, beginning with the landmark 1967 referendum. This crucial event saw over 90% of Australians vote in favour of altering the Constitution to allow the federal government to make laws for Aboriginal peoples, and include them in the national census. This referendum was not just a symbolic gesture. It represented a significant shift in national consciousness and legislative power, setting the stage for future reforms. Prior to this, Aboriginal Australians were excluded from federal laws and policies, creating a disparity in legal recognition and rights. The 1967 referendum laid the groundwork for subsequent legislative and social changes by officially acknowledging Aboriginal Australians as equal citizens. The 1992 Mabo decision was another watershed moment, delivering a profound shift in Australian legal and social frameworks. Named after Eddie Mabo, an Indigenous man from the Torres Strait Islands, the High Court's ruling recognized that Indigenous Australians had a pre-existing system of land ownership and connection to their lands, contrary to the previously accepted doctrine of terra nullius, which falsely claimed Australia was empty land. The decision invalidated this doctrine and legally acknowledged the native title rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. This landmark judgment not only validated Indigenous land claims, but also established a legal basis for ongoing negotiations and settlements, creating a more equitable framework for addressing historical grievances related to land dispossession. In 2008, Prime Minister Kevin Rudd's formal apology to the stolen generations marked a significant step in Australia's journey towards reconciliation. The stolen generations refers to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children who were forcibly removed from their families by government policies from the late 19th century to the 1970s. These policies aimed to assimilate Indigenous children into European culture, resulting in widespread trauma and loss of cultural identity. Rudd's apology was a historic acknowledgement of the profound injustices and suffering caused by these policies, representing a national recognition of the pain inflicted on Indigenous families and communities. This apology was more than a mere expression of regret. It was a crucial element in the broader reconciliation process, aimed at fostering healing and building a more inclusive society that respects and values the rights and contributions of all Australians. Collectively, these milestones illustrate a complex yet hopeful journey towards justice, recognition, and reconciliation for Indigenous Australians, reflecting a commitment to addressing past injustices and working towards a more equitable future. Today, Australia stands as a prosperous and vibrant nation with a high standard of living and a richly diverse population. This contemporary society is built upon a complex history that includes addressing significant contemporary challenges. Climate change remains a critical issue, with Australia facing increasingly severe weather events, such as devastating bushfires, prolonged droughts, and rising sea levels. These challenges require comprehensive environmental strategies and policies aimed at sustainability and resilience. The pursuit of environmental stewardship is balanced with the ongoing efforts to reconcile with Indigenous Australians, whose historical grievances and struggles continue to shape the nation's conscience. The process of reconciliation involves a profound commitment to addressing past injustices, such as the legacy of the stolen generations and systemic inequalities that have marginalized Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities for generations. Efforts include supporting land rights, improving education and healthcare access, and fostering economic opportunities to close persistent gaps. Additionally, Australia grapples with its role on the global stage, navigating complex geopolitical dynamics and contributing to international discussions on trade, security, and human rights. The nation's evolving identity is informed by its rich tapestry of cultures, reflecting waves of migration from Europe, Asia, and beyond, each adding to the mosaic of Australian society. This multicultural landscape is celebrated through various cultural events and public policies designed to promote inclusivity and social cohesion. Australia's history, from its ancient Aboriginal roots and the impacts of European colonization to its modern achievements and ongoing struggles, creates a multifaceted narrative of resilience, adaptation, and transformation. As Australia continues to evolve, it remains dedicated to confronting its historical legacies while striving towards a future that is equitable, sustainable, and reflective of its diverse heritage. As we reflect on the vivid tapestry of Australia's past and present, It's clear that the nation's journey from its ancient Aboriginal origins to its current status as a thriving, multicultural society is marked by profound transformation and resilience. Today, Australia showcases a stunning montage of modern life, with bustling cities like Sydney and Melbourne standing as symbols of its dynamic economy and cultural diversity. The landscapes are equally breathtaking, from the iconic Sydney Opera House and the bustling harbours to the serene beauty of the outback and the Great Barrier Reef. Urban areas are a melting pot of cultures where people from all walks of life come together, contributing to a vibrant social fabric. This contemporary Australia is a testament to a rich history of adaptation and growth, so with each facet of its society, from innovative architecture and infrastructure to cultural festivals and everyday interactions, reflecting the ongoing evolution of a nation shaped by both its deep historical roots and its forward-looking aspirations. If you found this exploration of Australia's history and present-day realities insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more engaging historical content. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What part of Australia's story resonates with you the most?